The galaxy knew of Earth before its inhabitants even knew of the stars. Nestled in a backwater spiral arm, its location was rarely discussed, dismissed as unremarkable by the grand powers that ruled the cosmos, but rumors spread rumors of humans. The Galactic Union, a coalition of hundreds of spacefaring species, had a policy for new civilizations, peaceful integration or, if necessary, containment. After millennia of galactic peace, the last thing anyone wanted was a species like the Rexians, who tried to conquer the stars centuries ago, back when wars could burn entire systems. So when humans discovered faster-than-light travel and began poking around the outer edges of the galaxy, the Union prepared to assess them. What no one expected, however, was how quickly humans adapted and how clever they were. Union observation post 3425 orbited a dead moon, silently watching the Sol system. A team of anthropologists, biologists, and strategic analysts monitored the humans, studying their culture, biology, and technology. They were a peculiar species, prone to bouts of extreme violence, but also capable of empathy, compassion, and collaboration. Their innovations were chaotic but relentless. They were far from the most advanced, yet something about them set off alarms. In charge of the mission was Commander Taro, a tall, imposing Jorvian with 6 limbs and a head shaped like an arrowhead. His species was famed for its strategy and stoic demeanor. Taro had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but the humans, they were different. Their unpredictability makes them dangerous, he often said during his briefings. "Sir," called out one of the analysts, a small insectoid named Yix, his mandibles clicking nervously, "we've detected a human vessel leaving Earth's orbit. It's primitive by our standards, but it's using a stealth signature. How did they?" Taro's eyes narrowed. "Humans do not have cloaking technology." Yix adjusted the display. "They didn't, but they do now." The Union had kept a close eye on the humans, but clearly not close enough. Over the next few months, more anomalies surfaced, strange power surges, untraceable signals, and ships that disappeared from sensors. Human activity had spiked, and despite their underdeveloped technologies, they were doing things the Union had never seen before. "They're learning faster than expected," Taro muttered, "perhaps too fast." Aboard the HSS Trickster, Captain Sarah Lee studied the alien station orbiting Europa through her view screen. It was invisible to most sensors, but human eyes and their new adaptive quantum technology could spot things that shouldn't be seen. Her mission was simple: gather intel, disrupt the Union's operations, and leave no trace. Earth had discovered that it was being watched long before its first official contact with the Union. Rather than panic, humanity did what it always did when threatened: they adapted. Sarah had been handpicked for the Human Intelligence Corps, a newly formed agency that specialized in unconventional warfare. While most of the galaxy thought warfare meant big battles and overwhelming force, humans understood something the Union seemed to have forgotten. War was about deception, surprise, and exploiting your enemy's blind spots. "Ready for the jump?" her first officers asked, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. "Always," Sarah replied with a grin. The Trickster shimmered for a moment, then vanished into the ether, leaving behind no trace. The Union thought it was in control. For years, they manipulated events, subtly trying to guide Earth's growth toward peaceful integration, monitoring their technological progress, while limiting the exchange of information. What they didn't count on was that the humans knew they were being studied and had been planning for this exact moment. Across the galaxy, human ships equipped with experimental stealth drives infiltrated Union territory, tapping into their communication networks, gathering intel, in some cases, sabotaging key installations. Union ships would vanish without explanation, trade routes would be rerouted, supply chains would collapse overnight. No one knew how it was happening, only that it was happening. Taro Saturday in his command room, a cold sweat forming on his brow. For weeks now, reports had flooded in from across Union space. Humans were everywhere and nowhere. They didn't attack with fleets or soldiers, but with precision strikes and intelligence. "They've already infiltrated our networks," Yik stammered, his mandibles jittering. "They've learned our protocols." Taro slammed his fist down on the table, his calm demeanor fracturing. Their technology shouldn't be capable of this." Yix hesitated. It's not just technology, sir, it's them. They think differently. The realization hit Terra like a blast to the chest. The humans had been underestimated. It wasn't their ships or their weapons that were dangerous, it was their minds. Where most species followed predictable patterns, humans thrived in chaos, in deception, in exploiting their enemies' weaknesses without ever showing their own cards. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the leaders of the human intelligence corps met in a small, unremarkable room beneath the Pentagon. Phase 1 is complete, Sarah reported. We've successfully planted false information throughout the Union. They believe we're far weaker than we actually are. The director nodded, a shadowy figure whose face was obscured in the daylight. Good, the Union is too powerful to confront directly, but with enough misdirection, they'll never see the real threat coming. Continue the operations, keep them guessing, let them think we're just sneaky bastards. As Sarah left the room, she smiled to herself. Humanity wasn't the strongest species in the galaxy, nor the most advanced, but they had something far more dangerous, the ability to adapt, to outthink, when necessary, to cheat. In the end, the Union would never even know what hit them. Epilogue. Years later, long after humanity had established itself as a quiet but influential power in the galaxy, stories would be told of the phantoms that haunted the Union, legends of human ships that could never be caught, of entire fleets outmaneuvered by small, seemingly insignificant vessels. And every time those stories were told, someone, somewhere, would raise a glass and laugh, remembering the time when humans outsmarted the entire galaxy with nothing but their wits and a few well-placed tricks. The war had come to an end, or at least, that's what the rest of the galaxy believed. The Kalari Empire, a militant race renowned for their brutal conquests, had spent years expanding their borders, crushing any civilization that stood in their way. After months of skirmishes, they finally reached a ceasefire agreement with the Galactic Union, a truce that was both fragile and uneasy. What no one in the Union realized, however, was that the Kalari had never intended to honor that peace. It was a deception, a lull before their planned invasion of Earth, the only human-populated planet in the galaxy. To the Kalari, humans were an insignificant, backward species, barely capable of holding their own in space, let alone in combat. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They underestimated humans. The Kalari had dealt with brute strength, advanced technology, and large fleets, but they had never encountered anything quite like Earth's Ghost Fleet. Earth, 4 months before the invasion, Admiral Henry Graves, head of the Human Defense Fleet, stood at the helm of the UHS Spectre, an unremarkable ship with a remarkable purpose. He had seen the Kalari's tactics firsthand, how they overwhelmed their enemies with sheer numbers and ruthlessness. Direct confrontation, he knew, would be suicide. Humans can't win this fight the traditional way, he'd said at the top secret council meeting months ago, but we're not traditional fighters. Instead of building a massive fleet to match the Kalaris, humanity had taken another approach: stealth, deception, and psychological warfare. The Ghost Fleet was born out of necessity, an armada of ships designed to strike without warning, to confuse and disrupt the enemy before they could even understand what was happening. Each vessel in the Ghost Fleet was equipped with the latest in cloaking technology, far more advanced than anything the Kalari had seen. But the real genius wasn't in the ships themselves, it was in the tactics. Kalari Forward Command, Edge of Sol System. Fleet Commander Vekis was unimpressed by the reports of human resistance. His fleet, the largest in the Empire, was ready to descend upon Earth and crush it. The humans had only a handful of ships capable of space combat, and even those were outdated and clumsy. There'll be nothing more than target practice, Vekis sneered as he reviewed the battle plan. Prepare the first wave. The Kalari ships surged forward, a wave of metallic beasts, their engines burning hot as they cut through space toward Earth's outer defenses. To their surprise, there was no immediate response. No fires rose to meet them, no planetary shields activated. They're cowering already. One of Vekis' officers grinned. This will be easier than expected. But then, one by one, Kalari ships started to disappear from their formation. On board the UHS Spectre, Admiral Graves monitored the chaos unfolding before him. His fleet hadn't fired a single shot. They hadn't needed to. Their comms are scrambled, reported Commander Patel, his voice calm and steady despite the tension. "They're trying to regroup, but it looks like they're losing ships faster than they can track." Graves nodded. This was the heart of the Ghost Fleet's strategy. The Kalari relied on brute strength and overwhelming numbers, but their strength was also their weakness. Their formations were rigid, their commanders arrogant, and their tactics outdated. They weren't prepared for an enemy. They couldn't see an enemy that wasn't there at all. Inside the Kalari flagship, alarms blared as ship after ship vanished from the radar. There were no explosions, no weapons fired, just the eerie silence of vessels vanishing into thin air. "We're being hunted," one officer cried out, his voice full of fear. "Hunted by what?" Vekis roared. "There's nothing out there." But there was something. The Ghost Fleet was using highly advanced sensor jammers and decoys to manipulate the Kalari's systems, making it seem as though ships were being destroyed. In reality, most of the Kalari vessels were intact but stranded, unable to coordinate or communicate. The humans, hidden in their cloaked ships, moved silently through the chaos, sowing confusion and fear. They disabled key systems on the Kalari ships, crippled their engines, and left them drifting, all without firing a shot. Earth. 2 days later, the Kalari invasion fleet was in disarray. What had been a force of hundreds of warships had been reduced to a collection of silent hulks, floating helplessly in space. The few Kalari ships that managed to escape the Sol system were filled with frantic reports of invisible enemies and ghosts in the dark. On Earth, the news of the Kalari defeat spread quickly, though the true extent of the Ghost Fleet's operations remained classified. As far as the public knew, the human defense fleet had simply outmaneuvered the Kalari. Only a select few knew the truth that the Kalari had been undone not by superior firepower, but by superior cunning. Admiral Graves sat in his office, reviewing the final reports. The Ghost Fleet had exceeded all expectations. Not only had they decimated the Kalari's forces, but they had done so without a single human casualty. "They'll never forget this," Commander Patel said with a smile. "We've rattled them." Graves leaned back in his chair. "We've done more than that. We've shown them that strength isn't about the size of your fleet or the firepower of your weapons. It's about how you use what you've got." Kalari homeworld. Fleet Commander Vekis stood before the Kalari High Council, his reputation in tatters. He had returned home with a fraction of his fleet and no answers. How could he explain what had happened? How could he describe an enemy that had never revealed itself? "The humans," he began, his voice strained. "They are not what we thought." The council members, known for their cold, calculating demeanor, stared at him in silence. "They fight like ghosts." "There. Enough," the head counselor barked, silencing him. "If they are so clever, then we must adapt." Vekis said nothing. Deep down, he knew the Kalari would never understand. They saw war as a contest of strength, of brute force, but the humans had shown them a new kind of warfare only that relied on deception, misdirection, most importantly, subtlety. As Vekis left the council chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Kalari Empire would never be the same. The Galactic Union prided itself on its diplomacy. After centuries of war, the Union had developed a sophisticated, highly regulated system of treaties, alliances, and political maneuvering to maintain peace among its many member species. Disputes were settled not by force, but by negotiation, with carefully selected diplomats acting as representatives for their civilizations. So when humanity was formally inducted into the Union, it was assumed they would quickly fall in line, adapting to the Union's well-established methods. After all, humans had only recently ventured beyond their solar system. They were small-time players in the grand cosmic arena, and though their growth was remarkable, they were seen as a curious, perhaps even naive species. That assumption, however, would prove to be gravely mistaken. Union Diplomatic Headquarters, Central Starbase. It was an ordinary day when the human diplomat, Ambrose Hale, arrived on the Central Starbase for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The session had been called in response to escalating tensions between the Draken Sovereignty and the Zintri Collective, two powerful factions in the galaxy with a long history of territorial disputes. The Council was determined to prevent another war, and the expected Hale to act as little more than a passive observer. Earth was still too new to the Union to play a significant role in galactic politics. Hale, however, had other plans. He was a lean, quiet man with sharp features and sharper eyes. Though his appearance was unassuming, there was something in his demeanor that unsettled even the most seasoned diplomats. His colleagues from other species dismissed him at first, thinking of him as inexperienced in the complex, ritualistic world of interstellar diplomacy. They had no idea what they were in for. The Drickins and Zintri had been at each other's throats for decades, and their dispute had reached a boiling point. The Galactic Council had managed to stave off open war through endless rounds of negotiations, each side maneuvering to gain minor concessions while refusing to give up any meaningful ground. It was a delicate balancing act, one that could fall apart at any moment. The Zintri delegation, led by the calculating and cold Ambassador Troll, was known for its mastery of negotiation tactics. They had a reputation for outmaneuvering their opponents with layers of convoluted legal arguments and exploiting loopholes in galactic law. On the other side, the Drickins, led by General Korvac, were far more blunt, a reptilian species with a militaristic culture. They respected strength above all else and had little patience for the subtleties of diplomacy. Their demands were simple: control of a strategic star system on the border with Zintri space, rich in resources and key to expanding their influence. The stage was set for yet another drawn-out session of arguments, counter-arguments, and posturing, but Hale had no intention of letting it drag on. The council chamber was vast and circular, with representatives from thousands of species seated in tiers that rose around the central floor. Holographic displays projected maps, treaties, and legal documents as the Zintri and Drickins presented their cases. Troll stood confidently before the assembly, her words weaving an intricate web of logic that made it seem as though the Zintri claim to the contested star system was irrefutable. She pointed out minor violations of past agreements, subtly hinted at potential loopholes, and painted her people as the victims of Drickin aggression. Korvac, in contrast, delivered a gruff, no-nonsense statement. The system is ours by right. We have the military strength to hold it. Any interference will be seen as a declaration of war. As the argument wore on, Hale watched with a calm, almost bored expression. His fellow council members glanced at him occasionally, but he remained silent. When it finally came time for the human representative to speak, there was a palpable sense of expectation. Would he take a side? Would he offer some idealistic plea for peace, as many new species had done in the past? Instead, Hale stood, adjusted his collar, and said, "I think both sides are missing the point." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Tarot's eyes narrowed, and Korvac's reptilian tail twitched in annoyance. Hale continued, his tone casual but precise. "This dispute isn't about territory, resources, or treaties. Not really. It's about leverage." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Both of you are fighting over this system because you believe it gives you an advantage. But what if I told you that neither of you can actually hold it?" Troll frowned. "Explain yourself, human." Hale smiled faintly. "I've run the numbers. My team's analyzed the situation in detail. If the Drickins take the system, they'll overstretch their supply lines. They'll be vulnerable to Zintri raids and subversion. And if the Zintri take it, they'll be fighting a prolonged insurgency against Drickin loyalists, bleeding resources into a never-ending conflict. Either way, both of you lose more than you gain." Korvac snarled. "And what do you suggest, human? Surrender?" "Hardly." Hale's eyes glinted with something predatory. "I suggest you turn this stalemate into an advantage. Humans have a saying, if you can't win the game, change the rules." The chamber buzzed with confused murmurs. No one had ever spoken like this in a council session before. Hale turned to the holographic map of the contested star system. "This system is important because it controls trade routes and resources, right? But what if we make it a neutral zone? Neither of you owns it. Instead, it becomes a free trade hub, controlled by an independent entity, one that guarantees both sides benefit equally." Troll looked skeptical. "And who would control such a hub?" Hale spread his hands. "The Galactic Council, of course, with oversight from representatives of both the Drickins and Zintri. Everyone profits. No one loses resources or military assets, and the Council ensures no one cheats the system." For a moment, the chamber was dead silent. Then, the murmurs started again, this time louder, more excited. Korvac's eyes narrowed. And what do the humans gain from this proposal?